Michael Brooks here. Joining us now is Ben Mankiewicz, who is the host of Turner Classic Movies. You can also see him on the Young Turks from time to time. Ben, how you doing, man?
I'm well. Nice to talk to you, Michael.
It's great to talk to you as always. Talk to us about, how long have you been doing Turner Classic Movies now?
16 years.
Wow.
Yeah. I think I made my debut in September of '03. So we're right at Sweet 16.
So, what's your selection process for what movies you want people to check out, what movies you want to talk about?
Well, I mean, I can highlight whatever, like on stuff like this, I pick the movies that I think people will be interested in. But we got a programming department. Here's who doesn't get consulted on our programming. Your friend Ben. But my closest friend at the channel's the head of programming, Charlie Davish, and so I've certainly developed enough of a reputation there for being involved in the helping to pick guest programmers, what's going to work for that. But the day-to-day programming, they're great at it. Probably the main reason the network is as successful as it is because they're so good at that. Picking, framing each night, putting every single night has some little mini festival, some little mini connection. They're geniuses when it comes to programming old movies.
Do you think are you somebody who, as a guy in the movie business, are you somebody who's burned out on this whole superhero movie thing, or are you one of these, or is that like being a snob and they're actually great, blah blah blah? What do you think?
No, I'm not burned out. I've been cremated. They're like
nice.
I thought Iron Man was really good. Right.
Like the first one, didn't that come out in like 2007 or something? Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's 2008. It might be 2007. I think it's 8, but I don't even know. So I was going to say, it's been a minimum of 11 years since that movie came out. And even by, the great Batman, whichever one that was, Batman, which I don't even know, but I can't even remember the title, Dark Knight, I was like, that's good, but I got it. The Heath Ledger was fantastic, but he was too brooding, Christian Bale. Like, I need movies that have a little, and I guess Ledger provided but I was largely done after that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care about seeing invincible people punch each other into buildings. And that is uninteresting and it has but that said, I am not a snob about it because people I love, care about, whose opinions I value enormously, they love this stuff.
There's a lot of people that I love and care about, but I don't value their opinions. You can make a distinction.
Right. No. But about movies, I care about their opinions, right? And so, but it's not for me. I don't think it's really for grown-ups. The movies are targeted for grown-ups. I get it. Some of the kids who grew up with that. But look, man, I used to play, Stratomatic baseball, dice baseball, and I would create whole seasons. I'd replay entire seasons. Mm-hmm. But I'd mix it up. I'd combine two bad teams, make them a good team, move them to D.C. where there was no team and where I grew up, and then play a 90-game schedule. And then every day I'd write down the real major league scores so that those were their opponents, and I'd have fake standings. That's dorky. And guess what? I would do it today if I had time. It was thrilling to me, right? Mm-hmm. That was Dungeons and Dragons for a baseball fan. So I get liking something, but my thing hasn't taken over every billboard, and my thing hasn't pushed out grown-up movies about adults. Mm-hmm. So that's where the resentment comes in. And everybody in this town out here talks about that movies either cost $1 million or $200 million. There's nothing in the middle where, you spend $40 million and you make 70 and people are happy because you made a little money.
What's the economics of that?
They need to make $1 billion.
Is the story that I heard, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because to the extent I know movies, I always wondered, why is it that in the 70s there were a bunch the quote unquote mainstream movies were, not all of them, but they were great. A lot of them, you had the Godfather movies and Dog Day Afternoon and Apocalypse Now and Serpico, and those were just the movies. And they happened to be just these really great. And I one story I've heard is that, the sort of Hollywood bosses were sort of just completely overtaken by the counterculture, and there was a new sort of economics there, and they kind of were willing to say, hey, maybe you guys should just have some freedom to explore here because we don't really know what the hell's going on. And then Jaws and Star Wars.
You're largely right.
Sorry, go ahead. Tell me about it. Yeah, go ahead.
You're right. You're right. That's a version of what's correct. 1967 and 1976, greatest 10-year run American movies ever, because they turned these talented directors. This is the auteur theory here, that they let these directors make their movies, and they got out of their way. And that's what left you with, starting with the 1967, this amazing year of Bonnie and Clyde and Cool Hand Luke and In the Heat of the Night and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner and The Graduate, all the way through, I think, 1976. I wouldn't include Jaws in the list of where things went wrong. That's still part of what things went right. That was Steven Spielberg making a great, great movie. It just made so much money over the summer. They were like, well, let's do this again. It really ends with Star Wars, like 77. That's and I'm not knocking Star Wars, but that's when the economics changed.
Right.
76 still had Rocky, All the President's Men network.
Mm-hmm.
3 unbelievable movies, vital movies for people to see, especially Network and All the President's Men for people who care about the media and politics. So that run where directors, Scorsese and Friedkin and Bogdanovich, Coppola, Hal Ashby, Norman Jewison, where these guys had the ability to go make their kind of movie, make it their way. Sidney Lumet, you mentioned, Dog Day Afternoon, Lumet at Network. Lumet is all over these movies. And then that went away as sort of corporate control took over. And it was happening, of course, throughout the 80s where,
right.
Look, I'm not an expert on this, but basically, to me, companies were like, well, we make a little money and our employees have a nice life and we have a nice life, and that's good enough. And then as sort of conglomerates started owning stuff, and including movie studios, it became, no, we got to pay the shareholders. That right. matters more. The shareholders matter more than our employees. And, the shareholders always mattered, but there was some balance, right? There was some, you didn't think you were going to get to be a gazillionaire because you were a major stockholder in some of these companies. You just thought, sort of, I'm protecting for, if something goes wrong, I'm protecting for my retirement, so I don't have to work until I'm 70. The culture shifted in America, and it started, and then it began affecting movies. And some of these guys then went out and lost a lot of money on these movies, right? Like when the auteur theory doesn't work, you spend a lot of money and the movie's terrible.
Right.
But you're right. It gave us these, Coppola in 3 years makes The Godfather, the conversation in between about electronic surveillance, which is another movie everybody should see. And then The Godfather 2. I mean, Godfather, it's unbelievable what that guy did
that's
in a short period of
incredible
time.
run.
Mean Streets, Taxi Driver.
Yep.
Taxi Driver, by the way, also 76. 76 is All the President's Men, Rocky, Network, Taxi Driver. That's an unbelievable.
That is an unbelievable stretch.
For
yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah,
was there like a little sort of, I don't know the history obviously, but then there's an idea that in the 90s there was a little bit of an indie pushback, and some of that, like, I'll admit I'm not a huge I don't remember the guy's name even, but I was never into like Clerks and those movies. Just because to me I just didn't find them particularly funny. Kevin Smith.
You're wrong about Clerks. It's brilliant, but I hear you. Go ahead.
You're wrong about Clerks. No, I'll rewatch Clerks. Hey, man, I probably watched Clerks through a haze of what Clerks was joking about, meaning marijuana.
Right, totally. Yeah.
So so I don't know, but I think, but then I do actually. I rewatched Pulp Fiction recently, and it's definitely not as cool as I thought it was when I was a teenager, but it actually is still a very interesting, very funny, very bizarre and cool movie. So what was that sort of like, what was that little kind of opening there that happened in the 90s? And then what happens to that?
I don't know. I'm not an expert enough to tell you what that was about. You're right in recognizing that it happened. I mean, I think basically, it was look, these are creative people. I mean, one reason I love living out here is because I think the most talented artists in the world are here, and you run into them in coffee shops, and when you play poker, when you play softball, give you an idea what I imagine the perfect life is. Right? You got a softball game, you play poker, and you get coffee and you talk about sports, movies, and politics, and what else? Then literally I could die at, old. I'll take 92, die happy. That was the focus of my life.
I've got some of my best experiences of actually starting to understand LA as a town has been sitting with a Ben Mankiewicz and maybe also a Michael Schur and just talking. It's great.
I mean, I'm from DC, but I love it out here. I've been out here 20 years now, and I defend it. I hate when I get, I'm like a New Yorker who, like how you guys are, about the city, and I just love it here. And
New York is terrible. It's being ruined by Russian oligarchs, and Michael Bloomberg destroyed every last vestige of it, and de Blasio can't save it because he's not left wing enough. So no, trash it all you want. There's plenty of people from Ohio who live here now, and they're terrible.
By the way, I spent last weekend in Columbus, Ohio, at the 25th anniversary of another movie from 1994, Mansfield, Ohio. But I stayed in Columbus. The 25th anniversary of Shawshank Redemption, another great 94 movie. Both Shawshank and Pulp Fiction better than Forrest Gump, which won won Best Picture.
That's embarrassing.
And so Columbus, Ohio, great town, great town. I had no idea. I'd never been there. I'm kind of in love with Columbus.
I believe it. And that's a great sort of, I think that should be a signal to the Ohioan transplants here to go back to what's great.
Go back to what's great. Yeah,
go back to what's great. No, I don't know why I'm picking on Ohio specifically. Well, I mean, I think it should be kind of obvious, but much love, particularly if you're a patron of TMBS from Ohio. Can we just take a second? I do want to talk about Trump for a minute before we get to the recommendations. But I don't know if we've ever talked about this on air. I think we've talked about it in person. I haven't seen the new Tarantino movie yet. I just don't. I don't even remember the last time I was in a theater. I want to see it at some point. But I really hope that people will all see Jackie Brown. Like, I think Jackie Brown, I rewatched that recently, and I am amazed by generous, amazing movie that is. Anyways, go ahead.
I have a great Jackie Brown story. So I interviewed Tarantino for TYT, for the Young Turks, like, 2 years ago when he had the Hateful Eight out, and he wanted to come in. He wanted to see me. It was an honor, and I was sure that I was going to be a part of the extended Tarantino entourage. Like, the twice a year he had a party at his house. Like, I'd get an invite. Like, we weren't going to get a meal, but I was positive. Anyway, it's oddly that didn't happen, but it was a very interesting conversation. And one of the questions that I asked him that I was determined to, I said, "What do you say to a Tarantino fan whose favorite Tarantino movie is Jackie Brown?" And he looks at me and he goes, "Well, I'd say that person's not really a Quentin Tarantino fan."
Well, I'm not really a Quentin Tarantino fan then, man, because that movie, I mean, I like his movies. He's fun, whatever, but Jackie Brown is fantastic. It's on a different order of magnitude.
He was, I mean, I won't go that. I mean, I love a lot of his movies, and I think his movies are always fun. And I really only disliked one, and I didn't like the second Kill Bill movie. I loved the first. The second one seemed like a bunch of sword fights. But and Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, Inglourious Bastards. There's some movies I adore, including, I really like The Hateful Eight.
Oh, wow.
So
you are a Tarantino fan,
but Jackie Brown is my favorite Tarantino movie, and I think it's largely perfect, and I've seen it easily 10 times. And all these great actors just deliver in these perfect performances because the script is so good. So I think he's wrong. And by the way, in my movie Twitter world, I have a political Twitter world and a movie Twitter world. Because of this new Tarantino movie, Jackie Brown was getting a lot of love. So it's not, no one thinks of it first and foremost in his canon. I can't believe I said that. But it ought to be there. It's a great film from a great book. Elmore Leonard, if you,
Punch.
For the brief moments, if you're not looking to, there may be a moment in your life when you're not reading about the political and economic history of Panamanian migrant workers. If you have that moment in your life, You should read a bunch of Elmore Leonard.
So I actually did read Rum Punch. I read Rum Punch back in the day, and there's another.
That's where Jackie Brown comes in.
There's another. Well, I read it because I liked the movie so much. But there's another Elmore Leonard book. I don't remember the name of it, but I just remembered this scene, and this is a stretch here to try to recreate it. But it was one of the funniest things I ever read because it's basically like these two guys are sticking up a supermarket in Michigan, and in very Elmore Leonard fashion.
From Detroit,
And in super Elmore Leonard fashion, basically like a very old lady is shopping and she just has no idea what they're doing. So one of the robbers is in a position where he basically has to like check her out. Like that's the most efficient thing to do. And you know, these guys are his main protagonists are never like the actual monsters. So they're not going to kill her. So they got to like bag her groceries and get her out. And she's so rude and disrespectful to him and just nasty. And so his coup de grace is he basically like he tells her that her coupons are invalid. And it's just like a giant moral victory for him before they like leave the place with like whatever small bag of cash they took. It's so funny.
A version of that scene is in Out of Sight, which is also a brilliant movie made the next year after Jackie Brown, based on an Elmore Leonard book. Out of Sight, almost my favorite movie. Not the best movie, but it's perfect to me. And there's a scene where Ving Rhames has got to steal a car so he can bust George Clooney out of prison. This elaborate plan they have. And this older lady is wheeling her groceries out to the car, and he stops and he says, "Oh, man, let me help you with those." And she says, "Well, I didn't ask for your help, so don't expect a gratuity." Right? And so instantly you're on his side, and he goes, "Oh, that's okay, ma'am. I'm just going to take your car." Right? And it's this great, it's just like the coupons. It's this little moral victory for a criminal who you're rooting for, and that's what he does is get, always there's always terrible evil, but it ends up being the cool criminal trying to take down the truly violent, dangerous one.
Yeah, Out of Sight is actually another amazing movie, another good rec. I want to just for a minute, and actually, in Michael Wolff's first book, which I did read and I totally defend, when he describes Steve Bannon as an Elmore Leonard character,
that's great.
The perfect description. It's like, Jesus. What do you think about us having a new King of the Jews, Ben?
I think it's great. I think we've lacked leadership for some time. We need people to tell us what to do, right? How to behave, who to vote for, know. I mean, it's, we're laughing because the ability to maintain shock is gone. I mean, just a couple of days ago when the King of the Jews was talking about Kashmir, right? And the Hindus, I mean, he's literally, you got Kashmir, had a lot of different names. And you got Muslims and Hindus. They don't like each other very much. Big problem. You're like,
big problem.
Holy Christ. I mean, it's enough right there not to reelect someone if he'd done everything else right. Like, he doesn't know anything. And he's not interested in anything. And, he learned that day and was like, oh, I'll repeat that. It's like, well, you're right. I mean, he went on Wikipedia and looked up Kashmir. He didn't do that.
No, I was going to say, somebody way too generous.
They printed it for him.
Yeah, there's no way he did that.
Right. That's why I was promoting the CNN for the last bunch of Sundays has been running a series of movies by the decade. And I was on last Sunday to promote it. And they played a clip from '92 of Errol Morris, the great Academy Award-winning documentarian, interviewing Donald Trump. And for some reason, he asked him about Citizen Kane and Rosebud. And Trump's like, well, Rosebud, no, they don't really know what it is. They don't, but it worked. No one knows why they picked it. And it was my grandfather's name for my grandfather's bicycle. That's why he picked it. My grandfather wrote Citizen Kane. And so
Trump said his grandfather wrote. Oh, wait. I'm sorry. No, your grandfather did. Okay, I'm so confused by Trump's lies that I honestly was confused for a second. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
But one of the great shames has been that Trump. One of the great shames has been that Trump. Hang on. So you still there?
Yep. Good.
Do I have you?
Yeah.
Okay,
You're good.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Thanks.
One of the great shames of my life has been that Trump's favorite movie, he says, is Citizen Kane. But as I was listening to him talk about that in Rosebud, it's like he doesn't even know that it's a sled in the movie, and it suddenly hits you. That movie's whatever it is, an hour and 52 minutes long. It's inconceivable he watched it start to finish, right? Like you want to say to him, it's a sled, it burns in the end. You know, right? It's the symbol of his lost childhood. It's not like you don't have to be there's no genius in figuring out what happened there. So I had a nice line, at least as we were talking. I said, "That's the president talking about there's things that are unknowable, but they're all knowable. You just have to read a book." And
I remember that clip. I actually played that. I know that we played that at some point. It was
obviously, it just escaped me.
And he's like, well, I mean, it's Rosebud, and you go for things, and it's funny because it's like, not only is he clearly not seeing the movie, but it's like the part of Trump that is the bizarre thing about Trump is that on one hand, nobody is like Trump, and he's utterly bizarre, and then on the other hand, he's chameleon-like, and so that was the phase of his life where he was trying, he's talking to Earl Morris, so he needs to show that he actually has a deep New York intellectual streak. So he's doing all of these kind of like, he hasn't seen the movie, and he's also trying to really get like, I mean, materialism doesn't equal happiness. I mean, it's deep.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, he is so incapable of pulling it off. It is, and it reminds me, you mentioned our mutual friend and along with the host of the Young Turks, Cenk Uygur and Michael Shore. They're my two closest friends out here, two of my closest friends in the world. And I lived with Michael. I've lived with Michael twice in my life, once for a year and a half. But also when I moved to LA, I stayed with him for the first 3 weeks I was here. So I was getting my feet. And it was, I recall then, but it must have been a couple years later, when early on in the Apprentice run, I said I'd watched it a couple times, and I was like, I like this Apprentice show. I don't know anything about business, but I actually kind of learned things from it. And I think there's not a typical host, but he's good. It's fun, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the way he fires people is fun, and I like that thing. And I'd seen maybe 2 episodes. And Michael says to me, essentially quoting him, and this has got to be, I don't know, 2004 or 5 at the latest, something like that. He goes, no, I don't watch. I'm not going to watch. I don't want you to watch. He's the worst person in the world. He's a horrible racist. He's ignorant. He doesn't know what he's doing, and he's perpetuating some great fraud. And I literally hate him more than any other person. And you should too. And I was like, well, Jesus. I was like, easy, Michael, whatever. Okay, great. Trump's the worst person in the world. Yeah, sure. Sure enough, Michael was on it, and he was on it early.
Well, there's some stiff competition, man. I mean, I guess with my reading habits, I would have said, I hear that. But guys, you got to check out this obscure senator in Brazil called J.R. Bolsonaro, because that guy.
Yeah, I got you there. The world is strong. It's only our worldview that, I was just talking to somebody else real quick about, when I went to Cuba, somebody who'd been to Cuba recently, a filmmaker, and he wants to make a movie there. And I was talking about when I went during the Elian crisis, and I went in 99 or 2000.
Right.
And you get there and you think, I know my dad wrote a book called Confidel, and my dad was not so much a supporter, but mostly thought this was on the U.S. for screwing up this relationship, forcing his hand. I mean, they play baseball every day there. They're 90 miles away. They shouldn't have been aligned. And if we'd been a decent country and not paranoid, we would have supported that revolution as all decent people should have. So anyway, I'm telling that story. But I remember when I went there, I still had this image, because the manner I grew up, that this is sort of a reckless outlaw place, and we had to sneak in, right? And they ask us, do you want your passport stamped? And then you get there, and there are things that are messed up. There are guards on the corners, and they want their citizens to tell on each other, right? So that's the horrible, horrible part, and it is horrible. Mm-hmm. But you get there, and you're like, Jesus, there's 10,000 Canadians here, right? There's people from all over Europe. Like, they don't care. Like, this isn't about us. We're the crazy ones in that regard.
Right.
These Canadians, you know how they got here? They took a flight from Toronto, and then they landed. And they told their friends, I'm going to Cuba on vacation, right? Yeah. And there were Swedes, and then my producer and I, we met these girls there. We're having coffee with them, and I'm trying to speak Spanish, and I'm like, do you want to leave? And they're like, well, there's not a lot of opportunity here. We'd like to go. And I'm like, do you want to come to America? And they're like, no, we want to go to Spain. They speak Spanish.
Right. And they have health care.
And I'm like,
we are used to having good
healthcare.
health care here. Yes.
Right, that's right. And I get
Right.
we probably get a job there easily.
Right.
I'm like, oh, right. We're not the center of the freaking world.
Right. But that is amazing that he would have that reaction, because I just think a lot of people. I mean, I never really paid attention to Trump one way or another. Like, I think The Apprentice was a little bit. I mean, that was a little bit back in the day, and then, he was this racist buffoon guy during the Obama era. But it also was just like, whatever. Like, this guy's just some like '80s loser. Who cares? And actually,
an opportunity for Obama to land a great line at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. He was a
right.
That's right. He was just a caricature, a figure to mock.
Right. Actually, what shifted me, and I mean, this is maybe still to my maybe just a defect, because I still find him very funny at times. But what shocked me, I remember when he finally declared he was running for president, was that his first first he came out and made those racist, despicable comments about Mexicans. And that was obviously the engine. I mean, he gave you the two engines of his campaign. He gave you fake economic fake economic populism, the core of racism and xenophobia. And then the third one was that he's funny. And I remember he was going on Bill O'Reilly, and he was just talking nonsense about, like, well, I'm going to go into Iraq and we're going to get the oil. And I mean, actually not nonsense. In fact, he was basically talking what we did, just in his own dumb way. And O'Reilly's like, well, you keep saying George W. Bush was bad, but you sound a lot like him. And Trump just looks at him and he's like, yeah, I'm a little bit smarter. And I remember just watching. I was like, Jesus, this is hilarious. I actually had no idea that this guy was funny until he started doing this. I thought he was just a disgusting jackass, which he is, but I didn't know that he had this ability to kind of flame people. And he certainly did.
And you're right. I don't know that he knows he's funny. I don't know. It certainly doesn't matter.
Right.
I think that was I think you've touched on part of the reason why, obviously, that he's connected with some people, because there is this, completely fake authenticity to him.
Right.
And most people who are funny are smart. You can't be funny without being smart. That was always my belief. Mm-hmm. And I still think it's incredibly hard to be. It's incredibly hard to be funny without being smart, but he has proven it, because no one can think he's bright enough to have this job, except, I guess, maybe you don't. I mean, but
him and all of the leadership class of the Republican Party and the Wall Street donors.
Right. I mean, if I were a legit Republican, the notion that I'd be like, man, so George W. Bush and Donald Trump, these are our last two. This is what we've put out there.
Hey, man, they deliver the tax cuts. That's all they care about.
Can I share one theory with you? Because I don't get to talk. One thing that I don't understand, because I've been wrong 1,000 times. Like I think Mitt Romney is the perfect example of what is wrong with the Republican Party. Because you're gonna, I think, agree with me.
Yeah, I like this.
This is a guy who has zero political risk for the rest of his life. Right, I get he may want to run for president again, but even that, I think, doesn't count. He just won. He's not up again until 2024. It's inconceivable that if he spoke out really against Trump, not just spoke out, but acted out, like, I'm not going to support him politically, I'll even go against my interests because he must be stopped. We have to take a stand. We have to take this party back. Whatever that means. They'd still be, they still wouldn't care. They still want to cut benefits for people who need them most. But you take that stand. And he is in no danger of losing, even if somehow in a poorly attended Republican primary in 2024, he got beaten to the right, by some praised Trumpist. He'd run as an independent. He's Joe Lieberman. He's Mitt Romney. He's the most famous Mormon on the planet. He'd still win. And we all know, we think, by 2024, what he would do today would be seen as heroic. And the media would play him as heroic, as the one guy who took a stand, the principled guy who took the stand. And it's a freebie for Mitt Romney. The worst thing that happens to him is that Mitch McConnell strips him of whatever important committee assignments he has. But I don't even think he'd do that because he's Mitt Romney. So it is a freebie for this guy to take shots at Trump. And the upside is media hailing him as a hero. And even he won't do it.
I just My answer is that, and this has been my position 100% from the beginning, is that there might be a few stylistic differences, but the reason he won't do that is because he supports this agenda. I mean, I just think that's the bottom line. I don't think there's no daylight. I mean, you can run through the list of what they and also, I mean, we can game it out maybe, but the bottom line is that he's the president and he's unbelievably popular in the Republican Party. So maybe, but I don't think. I mean, certainly, look, Mitt Romney is not going to be the guy who's going to want to take any extra heat. But I just think the bottom line is that we can't separate Trump from the Republican Party. It's the same thing.
No.
Yeah,
I agree. No right-thinking Americans would disagree with that. I would want, because Mitt Romney, like all these guys, and I don't blame him for this, he has an ego and he wants to be president again. That's his best path. It's a freebie, and
But he'd never get through a Republican primary, though. I mean, if he ran for president after getting, no way. That Donald Trump, they're going to put that guy on Rushmore for that party. They love him.
Yeah, I don't know. Whatever. By 2024, I'm certain that in general, we're going to have a different consensus.
By 2024, well, we might have a different consensus, but the Republican Party is going to. There's going to be, there's going to be some state auditor who says that, black people should be retroactively stripped of their citizenship back to 1670. Who will run for president? I mean,
Chris Kobach's going to have his hand raised, saying, "I will faithfully execute the Constitution of the United States."
I mean, that's horrifying. I don't know if he'll be elected president, but I think the bottom line is that if you look at the Republican trajectory and you read, Democracy in Chains, which to me is the best book on understanding how the Republican Party works. They have gone all in, and Trump has kind of intuited it in his own kind of dumb way, which is we're not going to expand our base. And what we can do is, even though we have a narrow base, we represent the interests materially of the most powerful people in the world, in the country. Not, the average Republican voter, but the still vast majority of ultra wealthy people that fund us, because at the end of the day, our policy set is for them. And then we're going to combine that with a nativist xenophobia. And if we can make the courts restrictive enough, peel back the Voting Rights Act enough, do this terrorist immigration policy enough, maybe we can engineer the electorate enough where we can just sort of keep, look, winning races that we lose the popular vote on, but we just get the map right. I think, that's what they do. That's the plan. And so I do think a guy like Kobach, because of his actual connections to white nationalists and so on, I'm sure people like Paul Ryan and Mitt Romney would like a little bit more plausible deniability and maybe an order or two of separation. But on the merits, it's all the same. And, I think the popularity of Trump really shows that.
You're right.
Yeah.
There's because guys like, not even guys, there aren't that many guys, but a guy like Romney doesn't do it. So
right.
I got you. I still find him to be a perfect test case to prove your point, essentially. So that's obviously you're right. Now, Democracy in Chains, is that an Elmore Leonard book?
Actually, honestly, Elmore Leonard could have picked some of the characters from that book, and it would have been actually very funny. I think it would have been great. What do you have some more? We've already given so many great movie and book recommendations, but do you have any movie recommendations to leave us on?
I just throw out a couple. We mentioned Network, so I'm sure a bunch of people listen to Majority Report, know Network, see Network. It's worth re-saying. So I'd see Network again. I'd see two movies from 1957. Great ones that, again, some people probably Space in the Crowd, where you realize that Andy Griffith can act. Bud Schulberg script, Elia Kazan's movie. That is a Trump-like character. Not just a Trump-like character, a Glenn Beck-like character, an O'Reilly-like character, and it's amazing and perfect, and you'll be stunned at how prescient that movie is. Sweet Smell of Success from 57, about sort of how easy it is, how access corrupts. It's access to a columnist, but it works on the sacrifices you will make, the principles you will give up to get in with the most important, powerful people in the world. It's the best access movie maybe ever made. And then another 70s movie, 3 Days with Condor. like
yeah.
a plot inside the CIA. Just to me, it's the best government overreach paranoia movie because it's also kind of plausible, right?
Right.
Like it's not the head of the CIA, it's not officially the CIA, but it's enough guys there to get something awful and dangerous done in the name of quote unquote protecting America from running out of energy. But those are, all of those to me are, and I mentioned another one, The Conversation, and the Coppola's sandwich movie in between the two Godfathers about what we can do with electronic surveillance. And it was primitive back then, but it holds true today. And given the world we live in now, that movie seems particularly chilling. Those are all, and I'll throw one more. Billy Wilder, Ace in the Hole, 1951. Again, about a reporter, sort of how the media can go wrong in pursuing a story that'll raise their profile.
Awesome.
So all those are perfect and great, and everybody will love them.
Go watch good movies. Go read Elmore and Leonard. I'll grab a Elmore and Leonard book if I can before I fly to Chicago tonight. Matter of fact.
Yeah, you can't go wrong. I mean, just there are 20 that are nearly perfect.
Ben Mankiewicz, you're awesome. Watch Ben and Turner Classic Movies. Catch him sometimes on TYT. Ben, thanks a million as always.
Thanks, Michael. Great talking to you.
Take care, man.